Friends, thank you for the opportunity to give you a short, brief report on the flood response that our churches have been involved with up in the northern part of our conference. I was involved in the floods of 2017 and actually spent 30 hours in my car because I was flooded in. I have first-hand experience of what it feels like to be impacted by the flood waters. As Seventh-day Adventists, we are students of Bible prophecy. And Bible prophecy tells us that natural disasters will become more and more a reality in our life as we very quickly speed to the end of this world. My question is, are we ready for it? My first email went out to our churches long even before the flood waters started to flow. And the phenomenal thing was that our pastors and their churches immediately jumped into action and started to prepare themselves. And I'm here today to just share with you very briefly the work that these pastors and these churches were doing in response to helping our own people, but also in response to helping their communities around them. Let me just backtrack for a second. The Bureau of Meteorology predicts that natural disasters like cyclones and severe weather events will actually make landfall more into our territory, South Queensland, the northern part of North New South Wales in the future, and therefore we need to be ready for that. What has happened in this current floods was a 1 in a 500 year flood. The first area that was evacuated when the flood water started to come down was Tumbulgum. Tumbulgum Church lies on higher ground in comparison to the community, and the community has a key to our church property's gate. And normally when flood waters come, they just open up the gate to Tumbulgum Seventh-day Adventist Church, and they park their cars on higher ground. What a devastation I observed later on as I traveled through that area and saw how that the flood waters had picked cars up and just piled them on top of each other. The devastation was enormous, not just to vehicles, but to homes and to people's property. I want to share with you that Lismore Church, how God orchestrated in these floods that the SES actually brought their boats with evacuated people a few hundred yards away from the steps of our church. And right there, at that right moment, our pastor there went to check on the church to see whether it was still safe or not. Saw the people in the pouring rain standing outside just after the boats had dropped them off, waiting for the teams to come and remove them to the evacuation centers. He immediately jumped into action. He opened the church doors. His wife rang and he said, "Bring me some soup." He phoned the op shop people. They brought up clothing and started giving clothing away. Electricity was cut off. Phone reception was very poor. People that have been waiting the entire night to be evacuated needed to make contact with their family and friends. They needed something warm. They needed something dry. The church brought in a generator to help people charge their phone. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Lismore became the center of hope for people in a hopeless situation. Murwillumbah Church was completely flooded, including my own church at Mullumbimby. And in spite of the fact that our churches were completely flooded, part of our teams were involved in trying to clean our church while other teams went out to try and help the community. In Murwillumbah, about half of the volunteer base went out, even on Sabbath morning after a very short devotion, had gone out into the community to see how they could help the community to recover. What a phenomenal testimony it was. Bray Park Church, because it's on a higher ground, opened its doors. People went there and were helped. Food was distributed. One of the most extraordinary stories for me was that has happened at Kingscliff Church. While the floodwaters were centimeters away initially from going into some of the church property, it was still fairly dry. The church building itself was not flooded, but became the center for all the different denominations around Kingscliff to make Kingscliff Seventh-day Adventist Church the center of the operation to reach out into the community. Eventually, over 4,000 volunteers from different denominations, including our own, started to operate and was sent out into the community, became a center where people were referred to for help, and became eventually a registered place of refuge for people. From there, food was distributed, food parcels, people were fed, help was given, and right now, as I'm sitting here in the Kingscliff Church doing this recording, there is government agencies and other agencies right in the worship center busy helping people towards their recovery. Friends, our church in Ocean Shores, although Ocean Shores was evacuated, especially Golden Beach, our church in Ocean Shores were on higher ground, and they immediately opened up their doors. 70 people took refuge and stayed in that church. And when we later on went to visit that church, one after the other community people would pop in and just hug the pastor, and you could see that they're old friends already. There was a phenomenal response in feeding, accommodating, putting beds in place for people to live in this in that area. In Ballina, Alstonville, our pastor there phoned around, made sure that his people were safe, and then asked their church members to open their homes and their hearts for people that were displaced. People were taken in refuge in our members' homes. They were fed and were helped, and that church became a center, reaching out not only into Ballina and into Alstonville, which was on high ground, but into Lismore to help the community there. This includes Casino and Yamba, that was in a lesser degree impacted, but still food parcels and support, food hampers were given out. One of the things that I cannot other than mention here today is the way that our conference reacted. The moment that the flood waters started to respond, I received a phone call from our treasurer that said, David, we have met as ADCOM, as conference leaders, and we have made $30,000 immediately available to assist our own members that have been impacted by the flood. Adventist Community Service has just received DGR status, and we have immediately opened up with the conference's help a flood appeal, and within a very short period after that appeal was opened up, we have already received over $148,000 of donations that have been given to us to assist our fellow brothers and sisters. We have so far to date already processed $125,000 in assistance of our church members. Where the floodwaters in the past had come up 11 meters in Lismore, it had exceeded 14 meters. It has far exceeded any flood that we have had in the past 500 years. The devastation is enormous. The response of our people is extraordinary. I've witnessed firsthand people that knew of families that were stranded, that they jumped onto kayaks and set sail into the storm waters. disregarding their own safety to try and rescue other people. I've witnessed Adventist young people scaling down into the flood waters that surrounded people caught up in the M1, trying to reach those people and try to find out whether they could be helped or assisted, or whether food and water could be provided. Some of the needs that we desperately needed was that fuel ran out for people. Phone reception was cut to a minimum. Electricity power was lost. And eventually there was no more food left in the shops. Friends, Sanitarium came to the rescue as well and eventually delivered 17 pallets of food. And we want to take this moment to say thank you to Sanitarium for providing, for ADRA that has initiated that and had communicated with Sanitarium our need. We say thank you to ADRA also for providing funds to our churches and to non-Adventist people in our community. As you can see, it was a collaborative response to the flood. But I want to say thank you to God for protecting us, for initiating our churches to act to become the hands and the feet of Jesus. And friend, if you still would like to provide to Adventist Community Service, our fund, Flood Appeal, is tax deductible, and all that you need to do is you can go onto the e-giving website on the conference page and just look for the Adventist Community Service Flood Appeal. It is completely tax deductible, and 100% of your donation would be used for the area that you wanted to go to. If you choose to give it into the bank account of the conference, the Westpac Bank, BSB number, you'll see it on the screen right now, is the reference ACS Flood, followed up with an email to the conference just to let them know so that they in return can provide you with a tax receipt. I thank you for your support. I thank you for the prayers. The work is not finished yet, but above all, I want to say thank you to our pastors, our churches, that now for a month already has been doing a tireless work. For some of us, worked sometimes right through the night into the next day, continuing to assist our community in response to the devastation that has happened around us. May God bless you. Thank you.